This evening's program is sponsored by Superfood Supermarket, SF Horsford and Company Limited, and the Bagging House Retail Outlet. Thank you very much for joining us. Mark Brantley. Mark, good evening.
Good evening, Webo. Good evening to the listening public, St. Kitts, Nevis, and indeed further afield. It is a pleasure to be back here. We haven't been here for a while, and I'm very happy to be here this evening. Webo, as perhaps an opening statement, could I say that I've not had the opportunity publicly to wish the Prime Minister of the Federation, Dr. Denzel Douglas, a speedy recovery, and I do so now that I certainly wish him a speedy recovery from his surgery, as was mentioned in the media recently. I also, Webber, would like to join with the people of St. Kitts in congratulating Kim Collins, a native of St. Kitts, on his spectacular performance in winning the 100-meter gold in the World Championships in France. I think he demonstrates the power, if you will, of us as small island people and what we can achieve if we put our mind to it. I'm looking forward, as always, Webber, to a good conversation this evening. I'm trusting and hoping that the people at home will call in. Seems to me that there are a number of issues on the table, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to have a discussion on much of those issues as we go through the evening.
Ted, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo. As usual, it's always an honor and a privilege to be able to take part in this program. It is particularly a privilege for me to be part of this program at a time when people of Nevis are moving forward to a very momentous period, when we should be talking to one another, we should be breaking down barriers, we should be breaking down prejudices and joining as one people. And I hope that our discussions here tonight would help in that direction. I want to join my colleague and friend Mark Brantley in his words regarding the Prime Minister. I too have not been able to make contact with him personally, but I sincerely hope that he will get well soon. Insofar as Kim Collins is concerned, I think his performance was magnificent. I think it shows what commitment and hard work can do, and that small island has nothing to do with success or failure. It depends on the human spirit, and I hope that his performance will help other young people to see what they can do, even though they come from a small island.
Kenneth, good evening.
Good evening, Weber. It's always a pleasure when a poor boy from just Hobson, Brown Hill, with a connection with St. Paul, St. Kitts, get the pleasure to speak to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis and the wider Caribbean. I want to echo a bit of what my other two fellow panelists said earlier, except to say that the people of Nevis and St. Kitts should both be proud of Mr. Collins' achievement. I notice Mac said that he's joining the people of St. Kitts. Well, I am proud to say the people of Nevis and St. Kitts. When Keith Atherton and the other fellows played, the commentators were from St. Kitts and Nevis. So I think that we, both islands should join in congratulating Mr. Collins. And as Mr. Hobson rightly said, because an island is small, limited resources, it doesn't mean that our people cannot aspire for great things. And I hope that Mr. Collins' achievement will send a message to the schools throughout the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. And as today I was in St. Kitts and engaged in a conversation with a few friends, and said that we hope that we will see the kind of endorsements from the big conglomerates that some of the other persons get when they reach these achievements. And if Mr. Collins get these endorsements, that he will rightly use them to try to get whatever aid or whatever whether it is sporting goods, track shoes, bats, or whatever for the various schools. I mean, I think that we did an editorial a couple of weeks ago in the Observer wishing the Prime Minister well, and I think he knows that comes from the heart. He's a fellow St. Paulian, and I hope that he have a speedy recovery.
Edric, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo. Good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to the people of St. Kitts, and more particularly the people of Nevis, those people who are listening to us on the World Wide Web. A pleasant good evening to all. And I too must join my colleagues with reference to congratulating Tim Collins with that mammoth victory with reference to the 100 meters. He, of course, is the fastest man on earth, and he is a St. Kitts Nevis national for which all of us should be proud. He has taken our country to greater heights, and I hope this would be one of the unifying forces that might come to play in the current scheme of things. I have taken the opportunity in the past to wish the Prime Minister a speedy recovery. I hope that many of his medical colleagues would have tapped in and sent the right medicine, as the case might be, to get him back on his feet, to lead and guide our nation upward and onward. I'm looking forward again for this evening's debate or discussions, and I think it would be fruitful, because we all, I think, have been out in the cold or in the field for quite some time, and I think we are loaded with an enormous amount of information with which to disseminate to the listening public, and I hope you people are listening and will call in. Thank you again.
This is the Let's Talk program, your voice in the community, and with Edric W. Stanley, he's a businessman. Mark Brantley is a practicing lawyer here in Nevis. So is Ted Hobson. Kenneth Williams is a newspaper publisher. He publishes the weekly St. Kitts Nevis Observer newspaper. Again, thank you all for joining us. Gentlemen, the number of issues, as we indicated, can go on the table this evening. First off, I'd like to put on the table that a number of unpleasant activities have been happening in Nevis recently. Of course, the varied robberies and so on. I think that's going to be one of the issues that I think people are talking about a lot. Of course, also, we've got the secession issue. It's called nowadays the independence of Nevis, and perhaps I wonder, well, if there's a particular difference, maybe you have an idea on that. We indicate once more that tonight's program brought to you courtesy of Superfood Supermarkets, S.L. Horsford and Company Limited, Bag & House Retail Outlets, in association with the Nevis Press and Public Relations Department, Cable TV of Nevis, Web Housing and Developers, Net.kn on St. Kitts, and the Caribbean Spa House One Radio. Let's start with you, Matt. You put in on the table first off one.
Well, I think, as you say, there are a number of issues that have impacted the minds of Nevisians recently. Some not so recently. The secession issue, I believe, the independence issue, as it is now being referred to, as you rightly point out, is...
Let me ask this, Matt, specifically. I suppose that not everybody is going to be abreast of it, but a number of high-powered weaponry absent or missing from the Nevis division of the St. Kitts Nevis Police Force. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, it I think fits into the pattern of criminal behavior that we've seen. Some, I would hope, very small element in the division of public, or certainly people here who are among us. I think that based on the information I have, these weapons went missing, and some charges have been proffered against members of the police force, senior members of the police force. It is my hope that the police here, you know, where I always defend the police, because I sleep at nights feeling a little bit more comfortable that they're there. And it is my hope that they would very speedily be able to resolve this issue of where these weapons might have gone and where they would have disappeared to. Fortunately, I have not heard any suggestion that those weapons have in any way, shape or form been connected with any of I think 2 or 3 recent robberies that we've heard about. And I should also add that from what I gather, some people have in fact been arrested for the Food Savers robbery. I mean, that is certainly the information that I have. And so I would commend the police there, and hopefully they have indeed got the right people. I don't know that, of course. That would be determined in a court of law. But the fortunate thing, Rebel, is that while we've heard that these weapons have gone missing, we have not, and I trust that we do not hear that these weapons have been involved in any criminal activity.
But the fact that they have gone missing, though, and from the custody of the police, if you will, is it not even a more serious concern?
Well, I think it is cause for concern. I think it does demonstrate that the police were less than vigilant and less than careful in their handling of these high-powered weapons. But it has happened, and it is only left for us now to trust and hope that there is a speedy recovery of those weapons so that they do not find themselves into the hands of people, or if they are in the hands of people, that there's a speedy recovery of those weapons so that they're not used for criminal activity. But I do agree with you that it does demonstrate some absence of vigilance on the part of the police, and the police hierarchy, I'm sure, with the charges that have been proffered, would have to deal with those matters.
Edric, did that surprise you based on the build-up things that we were hearing happening as far as criminal activity is concerned, or do you think it's an isolated incident?
Unfortunately, it is not an isolated incident. What I mean by that is that we understand our society, we understand the forces that are operating within our society, and these forces obviously have been predicated on the need to have money, power, and those weaponry or weapons that have disappeared, they represent a tremendous amount of worth. They represent a tremendous amount of power, especially in the wrong hands. And when I say it is unfortunately not an isolated incident, is that so many things have happened within our society over the past, say, 2 years, that there is cause for alarm. I remembered we had a kind of a seminar down at the Cultural Center some 1.5 years ago, if my memory serves me correctly. And we have made a lot of suggestions with reference to what the police should do. It simply means that somebody has been sleeping at the switch, because again, these weaponry that have been missing are not easy pieces. They are specialized pieces, and this, in my view, represents weaponry that the armed forces should be using. And as a consequence, those who have been charged with the responsibility to ensure that their safety would always be in the right hands and their whereabouts would always be known, they must be held accountable. And at this juncture, we must call on the total leadership within our police department to pull their horns in, get the reins of the organization, and to ensure that something like this does not happen again. Someone mentioned, and we all hear rumors, that the weapons are somewhere in the brown pasture area. I hope that that is correct, and I hope it gives the police a lead. If it is incorrect, it means that an enormous amount of work needs to be done to track them down, to apprehend, and ultimately punish those who are responsible. But again, you do not leave those things idly. You don't leave them hanging around, and those people who are charged with keeping them in check, knowing about where they are, must again be held accountable. They would be found ultimately.
By the way, our numbers.
And I believe what should be done within our community now is that a reward of a certain magnitude should go out with the hope that we can lure those who are in possession of these weaponry to turn them over to the rightful authorities.
Our numbers are 869-469-161-61700. We can start accommodating your contributions now. Kenneth, your paper did a piece and an interview with the inspector who was in charge of that particular unit. He's been charged. He's going to be brought before a tribunal. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I, for one, did not like the way the whole thing played out in the media for the whole week, as if the good officer, I mean, the impression people would have gotten initially was that he was the one that took the weapons. And while the police spent so much time on that, to my mind, it didn't seem as if enough work was done in actually going out and trying to recover the weapons. And I always say when I'm on this program, you know, Mark said it tonight too. If I go home tonight and hear rumbling around the house, I am going to first call the police. The police is a very important institution in our community. And I believe I know Officer Lescott. I believe he's a man, a hard worker. In fact, bear in mind where the man was. He was on the beach, trying to protect our shores from drug dealers bringing in drugs or whatever else.
But Kenneth, the investigator, the deputy commissioner, must have known that.
Well, I don't know if he knew or not. I mean, based on the way he dealt with it, it didn't seem like he knew. The thing is that someone I understand must take responsibility for the missing weapons. No question about that. But you cannot have officers working their tail off, and if they feel if they slip, that they're not going to have the support of the hierarchy of the force, they're going to throw them to the dogs. And I think there is a level of that feeling within the police force. You know, Lescott is a very, very hard worker and dedicated policeman. I am not saying that if indeed, when the investigation is over, and if it is found that he was negligent, then of course whatever punishment there is, it should be, he should bear. But at the same time, I oppose to the way the thing was done, was played out for a whole week in the media.
But it might be also fair to say that the investigating official would have known some of the facts that we may not have known, right?
Well, Webo, that might be. The thing is that being the investigating officer and being that he's the deputy commissioner of police, and I will tell you, I know Jeffers. Jeffers is a very hard worker. He's a very he's a well-trained police officer who mean well, but he gets carried away at times.
Okay, let's get some weighing from the public. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening. I'm just calling to mention that over the last 2 weeks, 2 Saturdays, I should say, we have heard an executive member of the Nevis Reformation Party accusing the Premier of being ultimately responsible for the missing arms and ammunition. I'd just like to get the panelists spin on that.
Senator Nolan, I'm happy that you're calling to raise that, because
okay.
Can I take it?
Yeah, but if what I prefer, if they don't recognize or give that particular information, we don't do that.
Yeah, but I agree with but Senator Nolan is a public official.
Yeah, but he did not identify himself, so I'm asking, unless they do that, we do not guess that.
Appreciate that. You know, I heard Mr. Kozia. I'm sorry. I heard the senior member of the NRP that he referred to spoke, and I could say I heard Mr. Kozia because he was a guest on a program on Saturday. He referred to 1 or 2 articles in the paper that very weekend, but didn't say that the Premier, in speaking, the Premier had some kind of address to the tourism industry, and one of the things the Premier said there, that he spoke to the police about stepping up vigilance and becoming more alert to suspicious behavior of persons. What I'm saying here is that obviously the Premier spoke to the police. Mr. Cozy accused him of being responsible. I mean, well, let me say, Webo, I know that Mr. Cozier is angling himself to perhaps run in St. James. But you know, go on to say here that Patrice Nesbitt will be the next elected representative for that area. And Mr. Koza reminds me of when you, in a clear night, when you hear the big dogs making noise. And then after a while, you hear a little puppy. Little puppies don't really know when to bark or how to bark. You see, the big dogs know when to bark and when not to bark. The thing is that you cannot rightfully blame the premier for guns missing. How in the world?
But my question mark there though will be, but the caller has gone, whether or not he offered any sort of evidence when he took the back of the claim he was making. Let me just take this. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Well, boy, I'm just with Kenneth just talking about Mr. Lescott. I think Lescott, he should be held responsible. That's a very silly mistake that he made. And I think, after you finish duty, no weapon should be left in the vehicle. The weapon should be in the station, locked up, everything. Everybody's supposed to sign in their weapon. And that's a very silly mistake, and he should be held responsible. Thank you.
I do not know exactly what the chain of command is, but I would say this, that to avoid mistakes in critical areas and within critical organizations, let's take an aircraft. Those of us who have flown know that we are advised, based on FAA flight rules, and rather than guessing or assuming, you must go through a checklist to ensure that everything has been dealt with to guarantee the safety of not only yourself, but also the aircraft and your passengers. And I would imagine that being in such a sensitive position within that police organization, there should be a procedure with reference to a checklist to ensure that nothing is left to chance, nothing is left to mind slipped, and ultimately, when the shop is closed, everything would have been checked off, ticked off, and put away.
So you're suggesting perhaps based on the system they had in place, perhaps that might have been where the opening was?
I cannot tell you what occurred, because sometimes we would read articles even in the newspaper, hear it on the radio, and would have seen it televised, and sometimes there might be some bit of misinformation entered into that bit of information that we've received.
Maybe
and
we'll get it
sometimes
when we get the investigative report.
When we look at that report, we must search it very critically to see where the links as it goes up and down that chain faltered.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Weber. Thanks, good night.
Good evening.
I would like to give, to say something, comment on the issue that is before us tonight, dealing with the weaponry. And I read the article that was, I think was in the Observer last week, commenting by Mr. Lescott that was saying what really took place and where he was at that time when the weapon was missing. But I feel like Mr. Lescott has get a bad deal based on what I'm following up in the newspaper. Because as far as I know, for the past years that I know Mr. Lescott, I think that he's doing a fairly good job. And I think that those who are responsible doing the investigation should do a proper investigation and make sure that at the end of the day, when they come in with a verdict, they have a proper verdict. Because you cannot...
Caller, you would agree, and Mr. Williams, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The article being referred to was largely Mr. Lescott's side of the story, though, right?
Right.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
At the end of the day, you cannot just taint a good man's name by a mistake, something that took place while the person was not around. And the article even go on further to say that several people have keys for that vehicle. But then why are they are laying the blame squarely at Mr. Lescott's foot? I think that is unfair. And as the previous person who was talking said that they are going to wait until then they get the report. But I myself will be following that procedure very closely and see that Mr. Lescott is cleared of the allegation that they have made in against him.
Okay.
So if you have a house and several people have keys, how can you blame one person and the other get away? I think other people should be investigated.
But somebody got to be ultimately responsible, right?
Yeah, but other people who have the keys.
Oh, okay. Mr. Hobson, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I like my friend Mr. Williams and Mark Brantley. A great deal of respect for the police. They are working hard, and even though we have had recently some increase in crime, we are still one of the safest jurisdictions in the region. And, I don't think we need to come down too hard on the police. But let me just say that I read the article in the Observer as well, and Mr. Lescott has stated quite clearly that he accepts responsibility as the leader of the task force. What my concern is that this incident does not weaken the effort of Mr. Lescott. Mr. Lescott is one of the most courageous, aggressive, decent police they have in the force now. And we are very proud in Nevis to have somebody like Mr. Lescott. Mr. Lescott is a hard-working police officer. He has been recognized by the Americans. He has been recognized by the British. He has, by his performance, both in St. Kitts and Nevis, been recognized in both countries.
But Mr. Hobson, though,
in
fairness, though, but that does not suggest that a person who is of that high level of performance and excellence could not have heard.
Yes, but he has accepted responsibility, as you said in the paper.
I just wanted to make that
I do not know the facts
point.
Of the case. I, like everybody else, would have to wait until the facts come out.
Mr. Brantley, let me ask Mr. Brantley this in terms of clarification and information. The article also says, Mr. Brantley, that he's going to be brought before a tribunal. Can you educate us on briefly what that might entail?
Well, all it means is police, obviously as a force, they have their internal disciplinary procedures, and charges are brought for lots of infractions, conduct unbecoming of an officer. I think the charges were listed, in fact, in the article. The charges being brought against Inspector Lescott. What it is an internal mechanism. It's akin to a court of law in the sense that you actually have the case being presented for and against, and usually it would be presided over by a senior rank, so the commissioner maybe, and the judgment will be rendered and punishment meted out accordingly.
Will the public get the details of that case, seeing that the public seems to be so interested in it?
In my experience, and Mr. Hobson may have more experience with this, but in my experience is not open to the public, generally speaking. I know
that has been my experience. I don't know whether the public is actually bad, but I have taken part in some of these tribunals, and the public is never present, but I'm not sure.
I have done a few myself, Webber, and it appears to me to be largely an internal matter for the police to deal with. And sometimes the officer, if he so desires, he can have counsel, because I've represented a few officers charged with various infractions. And as I said, the punishment can be confinement to barracks, there can be lowering in rank, there can be dismissal from the police force.
Perchance that is the case, that we, the public, is not abreast of, able to be a part of the hearings. Might it be necessary, you think, for the public, however, to get the facts of the case?
Well, I think that you talk about the facts of the case, and it is true that the article we saw in the Observer, I think it was, sought to emphasize, I think, Inspector Lescott's side of the story, so to speak. But quite frankly, following the reports in the media over the past week, it seems to me that the investigating officer has been talking quite a bit himself.
Exactly.
And he has, to my mind, in both the print and voice media, so to speak, he has been saying about, giving details of his investigation. So I don't know if there is, if you will, as the Americans like to say, a smoking gun somewhere. It seems to me that the investigating officer has been more than willing to share his findings, share the details of his investigation with the public. So it may well be that the police may ultimately issue some type of statement so that if members of the public are not allowed to go in and actually sit and hear the conduct of this tribunal, then they may nonetheless certainly learn of the result and learn of the evidence that was put forth.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yeah, good evening. I would just like to add that what happened in terms of the weapons disappearing is not as important as getting the weapons off the street. As Mr. Hobson said earlier, the officer who is holding himself responsible for the missing weapons, he is a decorated officer, and even though he's decorated, he can err. And in this case, the public is placing too much emphasis on what happened and trying to maybe say the officer is careless or officers are careless. The fact that the public is so interested in what happened, the public should be interested in helping the police to find the weapons, because the robberies that are being committed, in most cases, they're being committed by more than one person. And the fact that more than one person is involved in the robbery, I find that the public can get involved in trying to solve the problem. The police cannot solve the problem on their own. So we place much emphasis on the gossip side of things, but not on the serious nature. These weapons are highly effective weapons. They can shoot you from very large distances.
Caller, can I make a point to you or ask you a question?
Go ahead.
You know, as you make that point, which is pretty interesting, I have done a number of stories involving the police, and I'm almost sure if we spend a lot more time on it, the appeal that you're making for somebody's going to contradict or disagree with you and say that they normally give the police information, but sometimes it's not held in the strictest confidence, and all of a sudden we're going into a total new area.
Okay,
you're abreast of that?
That may be true. We live in a society where nobody is perfect, and in the police force, it has been said that they are officers who are not as professional as some, and in so doing, they may have a friend who they may want to tip off and give information to. That becomes very dangerous, because if you give police information and the officer who you give that information to pass it on to the person you are informing on, then you become a target.
Okay, but you're abreast that seems to be happening.
I heard so.
And you would agree that if that is happening, it perhaps can sort of blight things a bit.
Yeah, it can prevent people from coming forward.
Okay.
Well, like I've mentioned earlier, that, and I thought this might have been done, where a reward would have been offered for the finding and the apprehending of these people who are in possession of these weapons. Now, I have heard, and we know that a lot of information goes around in our community, that Mr. Lescott seemingly has been framed. We must get the information to at least tell us, in fact, whether or not this is true. A lot of information goes around in our community, and it's hearsay. And by the time it gets down to the 10th person, it could be completely a different story. But let me stress this point, that it is critically important for a reward to go out for the recovery of those weaponry. Because in the hands of the wrong people, as I have mentioned earlier, it is a dangerous game.
Good evening.
The spate of robberies that we are now having, those people who are committing these robberies, they'd be glad to get their hands on this kind of weaponry.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, the panel. Well, I can let people, please. Firstly, in conjunction with the missing weapons, I look at Mr. Lescott as a man of principle. When I heard about it, I don't think that he, is corrupt. So, the other time many media will mislead us. So, I don't think that he did something like that. So, knowing that he is in charge, I think that the allegation will be pointed at him, but I don't think that he did that. The second point I want to highlight is that I'm quite aware of the fact that the escalation of crime in Nevis has now become a spotlight, including armed robbery. Now, the reputation of the Charlestown police station is now corrupt. And the policemen in Nevis need to uphold the law with principle, so that the community will be more safe. Now, with the approach of full autonomy for Nevis, citizen for Nevis, the economy is growing and we are a developing country, which means we have crime will increase, which means that we need to increase security in the country and having more police in the country, also increasing more police patrolling and having community watches. Now I think that the Prime Minister instinct is he needs to look at the situation and take into consideration and stand the Premier and accept his recommendation. Because I think that in Nevis, the government, the Nevis as a whole, we have been sabotaged by the government instincts for quite a while now. I think that the people of Nevis, in order to bring an end to the political trouble war in Nevis, I think the people said they want full independence. I think no one should deprive them. If the country falls, there's no one to blame but the people. Because the government cannot determine that. The people have to make a decision. And if we as individuals need to sit down together and stop fighting against each other. Now, last point I want to just on is that I think that we need to have a policy in place for these idlers on the street because they're working. And most of these crimes are being committed by these idlers because some of them, they have children to support. I think that a policy should be put in place to determine their livelihood, how they live. I think that these people they need to have the discipline. And I think that a lot of these people are unemployed and there's a lot of inflation in the country and some of the young people are working. So we need to provide new jobs, more jobs. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yes, good evening. My question is, seeing that the police is under the control of the federal government, do we know whether the commissioner and the deputy commissioner and the criminal investigation department in St. Kitts is assisting in a manhunt to find the perpetrators of this crime, the people who went in and stole the weapons? And if not, could it be suggested from this forum that there should be an all-out effort on behalf of the federal police administration to see about this?
Yeah, thank you. That's kind of interesting,
Yes.
point, right?
Yes, Bebo. To tell the truth, Bebo, he has raised a very important question because I don't get the impression that anybody is doing anything. Today I went down to St. Kitts on the boat and two of the senior CID people were with me. And I was questioning them about who is dealing with the matter and they weren't able to tell me who was dealing with the matter. I don't get the impression that more officers have been sent to Nevis. It looks to me as if they've left it to Mr. Lescott to find the weapons. I don't get the impression that they are taking this matter very seriously at all.
Mr. Williams, you were following the case, I believe, and I think Mr. Brantley also indicated that the deputy commissioner who is leading the investigation has been given his side of the story. Did you get any indication as to whether or not that has been done, what they call it suggested? Because it seems to me that would be the reasonable thing to do.
I think most people around will know that I am very close to the police. And that's one of the things that I did. I checked around with not just senior, but junior officers. And it is Mr. Lescott's task force that seemed to be left with a charge to find the weapons. The same man who you demoralized, so to speak, and his team, whatever is left of the team, seemed to be the group charging to find the weapons. I would have thought that you have two M16 rifles, and Stanley made the point that these are guns that the military use, which is so true. They are on the street, night goggles, and you're not seeing the SSU, any such team from St. Kitts coming across to help to find these weapons. Bear
Unless,
in mind,
of course, Mr. Williams, the investigator, may well have information which suggests to him that that may not be necessary.
well, then he should bring the guns in. Then, if he have that information, we cannot run that risk because we have a small population of maybe 11,000 people, and you don't know where, if someone has those weapons, who have those weapons in their hands, how stable they are, what they plan to do with them. Why do they think they need those weapons in the first place? So the important thing is to get those weapons off the street.
Good evening, thank you for holding. Good evening, thank you for holding. We can hardly hear you. Can you speak a little louder?
Yes. I don't think that Lescott should be held responsibility for the guns. Won't another officer in charge of the vehicle?
You know, Webber, the caller is right, and I am going to put this to you, Webber. You are the general manager of One Radio. One of your rules is that no one should swear in the air. You are downtown. Let's say you're downtown visiting me, and let's say one of your DJ have a guest on, the guests swear. Yeah, you held responsible because you are the manager of the station. But is it your fault that the guests swear? No, not at all. The thing is that Mr. Lescott was out of his house in his own private time, trying to protect our shores. He sent the vehicle with the guns back with a junior officer. The junior officer allegedly went somewhere else than where he was supposed to go. The guns were stolen out of the vehicle. Yes, of course, Lescott will have to answer the charge because he is responsible. But to go around and to make it seem as if Lescott did something illegal, it's totally wrong. And then again, you still leave it up to the same man to go find the weapons. Something is wrong. Webo, I have a lot to say tonight about the police because I have a lot of praises for them and I have a lot of things to say about them. You have an SSU in St. Kitts with about, I think it's 30-something people, not one in Nevis. Not one of the SSU men are stationed in Nevis. You have some sort of task force that Mr. Hector, constable and another officer is in. Then Lescott had his drug task force that stripped him of nearly all the men. We have 2 or 3 now. And, Mr. Stanley raised a point about someone trying to set him up. I would not put it past some of the hierarchy in the force. Because, you see, Lescott's own greatest enemy is himself. The thing is that the man is dedicated to the task, he's ambitious, and as a result, he's been awarded by some very powerful foreign governments, and that might be a great envy.
Mr. Brantley, granted we are not abreast of the facts. As a lawyer, and you have heard information from both sides. If there is not a smoking gun, how does it sound to you?
Well, as a lawyer, I would know that I probably shouldn't answer that question because I haven't heard the facts. But
even I prefaced it by saying.
Well, I understand what you're just saying, but you see, we're in an atmosphere of so much conjecture. We really, truly don't know what's happening. I think that Mr.
Let me put the question this way: if, based on the information that's out there that you've gotten from both sides, would it be a case that you would defend? You'll work to defend.
Well, it really depends, you see, on the nature of the charges. I don't have I remember the charges were listed in the newspaper, but I don't have them to hand. If they're charges which are based, as Mr. Williams sort of alluded to earlier, on the fact that he is ultimately the man in charge, using the analogy that Mr. Williams used, you Weber Herbert are the man in charge of One Radio. If the charges are based on that in the context of the hierarchy, if you will, that ultimate responsibility for these weapons lay with Mr. Lescott, then Mr. Lescott has, to my mind, done the honorable thing in the press and says that he accepts responsibility. I think, however, that is a fundamentally different thing to any attempt to suggest that he had personal knowledge or personal involvement with the weapons that went missing. And I think that is where the smear comes in. The suggestion that he's not simply responsible because he's the man in charge, but rather he's responsible because he had some personal knowledge or personal involvement with the missing weapons. And I think that is the bit that certainly upsets most of us, certainly upsets me, because I think the reputation of the man is well known. And not to suggest that he cannot do something wrong,
Right.
but I think that the suggestion that he wasn't even around the weapons or on the scene when ostensibly they went missing is very strong evidence that he could not have been personally involved. So it really, Weber, in terms of, in my mind, any legal analysis depends on the nature of the charges that have been made against him. If they're based solely on the fact that he is ultimately the responsible authority, then that's one thing. If they suggest that he was personally involved, that's something else. Weber, while I'm on the mic, if I can say something, we've obviously been talking a bit about Mr. Lescott and these missing weapons, but more to the general question of crime. I want to say here publicly this evening that I have been here time and time again, sometimes like a lone voice here in the wilderness, talking about the general breakdown of what I would call law and order in Nevis. One only has to walk through Charlestown. You know, that's my favorite beating horse. You walk through Charlestown, you see people. The other day I had to ask a young man please to move his chair from the sidewalk so I could walk up to my office. Right? He had a chair that looked like it was a beach chair hanging out on the sidewalk. People in Nevis seem to my mind that they're doing exactly as they feel like. And to my mind, whenever this order sets in, lawlessness can't be far behind.
Mr. Brantley, maybe he was demonstrating how it is in paradise. If he has a beach chair, they think.
Well, he may well have been doing that.
Do you have a toilet?
But the sidewalks, to my mind, are meant for people to pass and repass, and that is the difficulty we're having. When our sidewalks, I went down to the public market the other day, and I counted 4 ladies in the public market. 4. And I counted that same day, I think about 7 or 8 people on the streets of Charlestown, Ben. And one asks the question, why are they on the streets when there's space in the public market? Mr. Hobson is here. He's the legal advisor to the administration. And he knows that I'm laying this squarely at the feet of the administration, because I've spoken about it time and time again.
So how about we do this?
But, before you go, I point to that only to say that what we're having, I find, in Nevis is a general creeping into disorder, into lawlessness, where people feel they can say anything, they can do anything. They sit down in the square, they eat or drink something, they throw it on the ground. Nobody is held accountable for anything in Nevis. And it's a very, very sad state of affairs. You have all kinds of people who ought to know better, getting involved in all kinds of activities, illegal activities. Right? One hears of people who one should be able to repose one's trust in, misappropriating funds, and nothing seems to happen. And people are looking at it, and people are saying legitimately, well, if they can do it and get away with it, why shouldn't everybody else? I am concerned tonight, and I'm sending out an appeal to everybody out there. The bad boys who are running around here, stealing and breaking into people's places and robbing people, their mothers know about it, their fathers know about it, their brothers and sisters know about it. Because if you have a son who's not working and he wearing jewelry, he coming home, he have ex-woman, he have car, he doing something illegal. And I believe that it's time that we start to stand up and take responsibility. We have some young fellas in Nevis, Weber, whether they work or not work. You go to any of the well-known gambling dens in Nevis, you meet them here. That's where they live. The police know where these places are. Gambling, the last time I checked, was illegal. But people do exactly as they like here, and I'm saying there's a general breakdown. And when that happens, lawlessness can't be far behind.
And Mr. Hobson, what I wanted to do is allow Mr. Hobson, because it is sort of directly at him being the legal advisor, and especially the situation with Charles. So Mr. Hobson.
Weber, my friend Mark was well aware that we passed the legislation to do with vending on the street. The problem is, number one, the police are not enforcing the law. We passed legislation on the beach for people can't, sell on the beach. Myself have spoken to the police umpteen times because we get complaints.
So, Mr. Hobson, what Mr. Brantley says is true then. Nobody is listening to anybody. Everybody's doing what they feel like.
You see, the point, it comes back to what I've been saying all along. We have no control over the police. We have no control over the police.
Mr. Hobson,
let me say this.
Yes, Mr. Stanley.
We must clearly understand how the deck of cards is stacked. And this whole thing boils down to vote or the lack of vote. I'll bring your case in point. Before I do that, let me say this. Mark made a point, and it's just this morning I was telling my wife that there are quite a number of people who are fully aware of exactly what's going on. And I said that I'm going to take the responsibility to talk to a few people, to ask them to talk to some of these gang members. Because it is said that there is a particular person who in fact transports some of these fellas to the place that is going to be attacked. And whatever is derived from the burglary or the robbery,
sharing the spoil.
It is shared among them. And when I found out the person, 2 days ago, somebody came right at my desk and offered a lot of information. They didn't even want to leave. And I was
got the
astounded
information right at your desk.
when they gave me that information with reference to the individuals that are involved.
You think the police knows, Mr. Stanley?
The police knows. But like I said, if action is not taken, and it is not taken because it boils down to a vote.
You
Because
mean the people are voting for the police?
Wherever you know what I'm talking about.
No,
Action must be taken. People must be fired.
Yeah, but oh, okay.
People must be fired. Action must be taken. And I could bring a case in point.
No, but I am interested.
There is a particular issue with which certain people within some government offices should take action, and they fail to take action, and it is like a cesspool, and it is expanding larger and larger.
Mr.
I have
Hobson,
not taken upon myself to write a letter.
Mr. Stanley knows of somebody and has got information regarding somebody who is as pivotal as that, who takes people to crime scene and for them to attack people, and he said he has passed it on to the police.
I did not say that.
Oh.
I did not say that.
Oh, but
That information-
You said that the police was aware of the person.
Well, the police knows these people. They know these people.
No, but that is
The police know that they do that. I mean,
The police knows.
that this particular person does that.
Because
No,
It's
I mean,
public knowledge.
I mean, because I
was able to connect the
I don't have any
dots.
power with the police, but I will certainly call the CID tomorrow.
But the police is not really responsible totally, you know.
Who is it?
We are, as a community, the citizenry of this community, are responsible, because until we begin to speak out, the whole these a hush thing, and you know it.
Good
So
evening.
Hobson-
Let me just take this. Let me take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, good evening to the distinguished panel. I listened to Mr. Hobson make a statement earlier that the island administration doesn't have control. But I'm a bit concerned over that statement for the simple reason. If the Nevis Island administration passed a piece of legislation, Nevis Island Assembly, who is supposed to enforce that piece of legislation? Isn't it the same police staff that it doesn't have any control over? On the point of the missing weapons, Mr. Stanley makes mention of offering an award for the return of those weapons. I would like to suggest that the police or the inspectors, the Minister of National Security, make a statement to the effect that offering an amnesty period of about 48 hours. But from what I'm hearing, these weapons are high-powered weapons and can do a lot of damage. I think that an amnesty period of about 48 hours and ease some questions off of whoever took these weapons and have returned this.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hello.
Good evening. Yes, you're on the air.
I'm very much disturbed in terms of conversation going on. And
We can hardly hear you, sir.
I'm very much disturbed with the allegation made by Mr. Stanley and Mr. Hobson this evening. It's not true that someone going around dropping off criminals to commit raiding and the police have done anything about it. The police
I didn't say that, you know.
Neither did I.
I didn't say that. In fact, I was
Neither did I.
I was
Okay,
challenging
okay.
Mr. Swanson
Okay,
on that.
let the...
Mr. Stanley on that.
Okay,
So
can caller go ahead and then we'll see.
I'm making that statement because I
Let me say it again.
Okay.
Let me say it again.
Okay. Mr. Stanley, go ahead.
Let me say it again. I got information dropped at my desk 2 days ago,
In writing.
and I was able to connect the dots.
And you are seen by the police.
Mr. Williams,
And in that regard, any one of us here with that information would be able to connect the dots. The same ability and capability and capacity lies with the police.
Yeah, but
But I'm not saying that the police has connected the dots.
Oh, but that's the impression you want.
Okay.
Given.
Okay, just a
You follow my point?
Give me a second, please. Caller, could you go ahead? Yes.
From what I understand, Mr. Stanley will say that he got information that someone is going around taking criminals to break stores and benefit from the proceeds.
Correct.
Okay?
Yes.
That's what I understand, Mr.
That's what I said.
Yes.
Stanley will say. But Mr. Stanley must investigate further because these matters have been investigated. People have been charged. Matter has been disposed of. And another 2 or 3 matters is pending before the court. So it's not fair to Mr. Stanley to say that the police have information and have been done about it. And I would like to answer Mr. Hobson when Mr. Hobson speak about the police not doing anything about the street vendors. Mr. Hobson and his government passed the legislation, and they're supposed to put things in place that the vendors can move from the sidewalk and go into the market. They are saying the market is not ready.
Look.
And as a result, the police cannot go and run the people off the street when they don't find an alternative place for them.
Right.
The other thing for the beach vendors is the same thing applies. They haven't found a location. That's what we were told.
You know, no.
Just a second. The caller, let the caller finish.
You must not use the police as no scapegoat. They must have it.
Okay, caller, just a second. Mr. Hobson, go ahead.
Hello.
Are you saying that the people who come up from St. Kitts to sell their wares on the beach and so forth and cause all this trouble, that the government is supposed to find a place for them to sell their stuff on the beach? I don't see that happening in St. Kitts. Why is it here?
Webo, you know, that's what I don't want to see happen. I don't want to see us singling out St. Kitts and Nevis because for years and up to now, people go down with the basket and the sidewalk and they sell the stuff. No, the thing is that, yes, the vendors in Charlestown and Pinnis Beach are indeed a problem. But I believe, and I've said here before, that the government must take responsibility, create an area so that the people could go and sell. The reason why they're in Charlestown and not in the market, obviously, if they were getting the things sold in the market as good as it's getting them sold on the sidewalk, they will be in the market.
Just a second.
You know, the thing is that
caller, just a second. Caller, you finished?
No, sir.
Okay, could you finish your point?
I'd like to make. Speaking about crime escalating in Egypt.
It's down by 80 crime over last year.
That's not so.
The same period.
Last year, we had over 392 matters reported to the police. The police made a pledge to cut crime by 15 to 20%. Now we're about 4 days short of the end of August. And we have 152 matters up to today reported to the police. Last year, August, at the end of August, there was 42 matters reported. We are 4 days short of the end of August. At present, we have 17 matters reported. At the end of July last year, this year, there's 135 matters reported to the police. And out of the 135, 54% was detected. The police trying their best with the limited resources, and these certain people in authority is calling them the police. That can't get us nowhere. We need the support rather than getting in this program and dragging down the police. We need to help the police. And I must be surprised in the earlier conversation discussing the matter with Mr. Lescott. That matter is sub judice. There's full eye on the panel. And that matter should not be ventilated in the media like that.
Yeah, but caller, can I make this point? If you caller, you're suggesting that the matter should not, for instance, have been discussed here tonight. But
That's not to the extent how you discuss it.
yeah, but Mr. Brantley reported and Mr. Williams that the investigating officer was given step-by-step details of the investigation.
Well, if he was doing that, he's wrong also.
Oh,
The matter the matter is on investigation. You should wait until the matter is completed.
So, is it not fair to say that because the
Then after that, you can discuss the matter.
Is it not fair to say because the investigating officer was able to give step-by-step details, it gave the media and anyone else information to...
I don't know about the investigating officer giving step to step. But if he did that, he's wrong. And Mr. Lester is also wrong to give information.
Yes.
I think that, while I understand what the caller is saying, both Mr. Lescott, who's the accused, and the investigating officer, in this context, I suppose the accuser, have been in the media. Both have given their stories to the media. And so, as far as I'm concerned, the matter is out there. It has been reported, and it's therefore something that's available to be discussed.
Let me ask this question. Let me ask this question. Let me just ask this question. We're listening to the caller just now. We're listening to the comments that have been made by other callers and the panel as well. I'm getting the sense that everybody is blaming everybody else.
I believe at this juncture we have to begin to talk. And unless we begin to talk, this matter is going to get worse. And ultimately, this whole society is going to go up in smoke. Because just a handful of criminals within our community committing these crimes, and there are few people who are willing to talk. And like I said, I got up on Monday morning and I said I was going to call the police on certain matters, this particular matter. And it's just that I'm waiting to gather more information why I have not called. As a matter of fact, I did call the police station and I asked for a particular person. He had already left because he had finished his day's work, and I just didn't get around to calling again. But I didn't go and say that the police is not doing their work.
Mr. Brantley, go ahead.
We, as a community individuals, we have to begin to assist the police, because the problem is really with us, the community.
Mr. Brantley.
Well, I think that I would like to take up from that and say that my argument is entirely that the problem is with the community. We have, as I've mentioned, the things like gambling and things. And I'm sounding like an old drum because I'm out here beating night after night, year after year. Mr. Hobson has sought, I think, to deflect attention from the administration's failures in Charlestown to control vending to the police. We have had an individual calling in who has deflected that attention back to the administration, suggesting they have not put certain things in place. Mr. Williams made the point earlier that people are on the street because they're not getting perhaps the sales that they were getting in the market. I disagree. I think people are on the street because they're allowed to be on the street. And because they're on the street, the buyers, the purchasers of their goods, see them before they see the people in the market. And that is why they're getting their stuff sold there. I said I went down to the market the other day and I counted 4 people. Now, we're all Nevisians, we know how many stalls are in the market. 4 people. The only time that market has activity is when the Dominica boat is in.
Mr. Hobson, how do you explain what is happening where the vendors are concerned?
And it's getting worse.
You're saying that there's a police?
As I said before, we have passed legislation. It is true that we have committed ourselves to improve the condition of the market, and that will be done. But a lot of the people who are vending on the streets, they're not going to any market. They're not going to any market because they feel that by being on the streets, they can stop people from going into.
And how should that problem be solved?
By the police.
By the police, okay.
There's a law.
Okay.
The law says they must not do it.
But the police says something else. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening.
Thank you for holding you on the air.
I'm the caller to say that I disagree with the police that the matter should...
My dear, could you lift your voice?
Yes, I disagree with the police who said that the matter should not be discussed at this point. The thing is on the streets already. Everybody has something to say about it, so I think it's a good time for it to be discussed.
Okay.
You're doing the right thing.
Thank you. Yes? Thank you very much. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Hello, good evening. I am here for my life, for them M16 and them kind of things. Yes, I am very sorry for Mr. Lescott. But you have to blame the head also, because there are more than one person who have keys to the jeep, and there are more than one person who have keys to the inspector, not the man in charge of the police station office. 2 constables have keys for the office. Also, 2 constables have keys where the ammunition them keep. Everybody jumped in on the left cut store. And I am here telling everybody, yes, you need to charge it, but I do not believe that he alone should take responsibility. The deputy come up and went on. I don't know whatever personal, whatever it is. But the investigation did not handle properly. If he had handled properly, things would have been different. And when more than one person have a key, right, you never know what could happen. And I also blame the commissioner and the deputy, because task force should have not been handled underneath inspector. He's the only inspector around who is going out there in the field, you know. If you happen to look at it closely, he's the only inspector. And whether he should have been inside in there sitting down making decisions. No, he out in the field protecting us, protecting me. When somebody going to take up the binocle, plus the guns, also the little stick that you walk with, somebody trying to get us to him. And whenever I see somebody that is doing good, we have people out there who try to fight them down.
Okay.
And I finish. And the next thing again, right, is that when William say about him, special branch, only, what the guy named there, only Hector alone here in Nevis working a special branch. When you have task force should be, say you have the inspector, a sergeant should be here. Because then when the inspector go home, the sergeant takes over. Nobody was here to take over. Also, when you look at okay, all these things, how come they don't bring dog squad over from Sinkis? Somebody mentioned it already. And the guys don't come over there and try and help and look for these things. We need the help. And somebody called in and said that, oh, well, you shouldn't be on the thing, on the radio about it. We're about them things that serious things. I could hear in my bedroom sitting down and somebody right there with the M16 pointing at me. So if nobody tries to talk and say things, nothing will happen. And we need to get up and go out there to help the police. We need to work alongside with them, and the police then need to speak to us too. That's true.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yeah, Mr. Herbert, on the issue of the vendors in Charlestown, I've written and spoken about it a lot. And Mr. Hobson must not be that critical on the police, or I should say hypocritical on the police, blaming the police, because when I asked a senior minister of government what is taking place since they passed the laws, that minister told me that they are going to be doing some work on Market Street, and they have instructed the police not to take any action at this time. So Mr. Hobson should not be blaming the police for not taking action at this point.
Mr. Hobson?
Well, all I could say is I would be the one that will be able to be speaking to the police, and I have not told the police not to take any action. I mean, the other day I saw people come up and hang out their clothes on the square.
You know,
with a string, a long string.
Yeah, but
and I spoke to a police and I said, how do you allow this man to have all those things there? That has nothing to do with any market.
But Mr. Hobson, get the feeling that nobody's listening to anybody.
that is a problem.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert. My name is Robert Jeffers, Deputy Police Commissioner.
Good evening,
I
sir.
have very much to say, but except to say that I need to set one or two things straight, particularly when my integrity is being brought into play and disrepute, particularly when people make deliberate false statements. I cannot recall who he said attributed some statement that I've been talking to the press and I've been given a story. That is a totally false statement. Because if anyone were to read the newspaper, the same observer that carried in-depth interviewed Inspector Lescott would see that the writer asked another question I refused to answer, except to say that certain charges were preferred and that the matter is going before a tribunal. I have given no one no step-by-step description of what evidence is in charge. The only person who knows that is I submitted a file to the commissioner that may probably go on to the relevant authority in the base of national security. Apart from that, I have given no step-by-step interview as how the investigation done. So I'll get to the record straight with that. Now, I read an article and nobody seemed to be addressing the issue, but I can deal with that myself as the attack that's been leveled at me by Mr. Lefka, but I'll deal with that at a different time and place. Okay, nobody's looking at that aspect of it. When this report was made, I was in Miami when this incident happened. I came back and was given an assignment which I went to do. I had nothing whatsoever to do with the dispense of weapons. I conducted an inquiry, and based on evidence that unfolded, I preferred certain charges that I'm entitled to do. The matter will be tried by whoever the authorities, whether it's the Public Service Commission or Police Service Commission, whoever. It would not be tried by Robert Jeffers or anyone within the police force. Okay? So I just thought I needed to set the record straight. I have nothing more to say at this point in time. But I can't make people tarnish my reputation.
Can I just ask a question?
Just a minute. Mr. Williams regular that he knows me and I get overboard. I don't know what Mr. Williams talking about. Overboard. I like to know.
Now, what I say is that you get a little emotional, Mr. Jeffers.
I'm not emotional.
You do sometimes.
What are you talking about getting overboard with what?
I also commended you for your good police work, but I did say that you get a little emotional sometimes.
Emotional.
Deputy Commissioner, can I ask a question though? As someone had called in and suggested that the entire force, or maybe not the entire force, but a good segment of it should be on the investigating scene looking for those weapons. Can you give us any information as to how that is going, as far as trying to find the weapon?
Mr. Herbert, we're trying to get as much intelligence as possible, okay? And the investigation be driven by intelligence. What are we going to do? Send a whole police over there and quote and go without as blind sheep in the night?
Okay, let me ask it this way. How can you inform the public as to what is happening with that investigation? Because as you are aware, I'm sure that the public is anxious about it. There are dangerous weapons and they're out there. Can you assure the public as to what is happening?
Daily we are gathering intelligence, Mr. Herbert. And if the intelligence proves creditable, then we'll mount an operation. But we are trying to gather intelligence. You see, there's a lot I can say, but I cannot say at this point in time because as the caller said, the matter sub judice day. And I would not go into any details at this point in time.
Are you getting assistance from the public? Are people giving you information so that you
some officers Nevis have been feeding information that they picked up off the street. But everything that we hear is documented, and if it's creditable, then we'll have it checked out. Okay?
Okay.
But there's a lot more like this at this point in time because everybody's talking and people do not know the facts. They're going to one side of this story, but at this point in time it's being inappropriate for me to make any comments further than what has been said now. But at the appropriate time, when the matter has been disposed of one way or the other, I'll be prepared to come and let the public know the facts of the whole matter.
Okay, thank you very much.
Fine.
Well, I think you should have asked the Deputy Commissioner if he needs any help, because I'd like to make a small contribution to the reward that would be going out for us to get those weapons off the street.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
They would go around and ask the business community. We would be glad to help in that regard.
I'm sure he heard that. Good evening, thank you for holding.
What about the constable who had the vehicle tonight when Lescott was on the protecting us? What happened? What charge would we go to him? I think he was very careless, and because of investigating the lock picking, the lock was picked. As I gather my source, the lock wasn't picked because when you pick a lock, there must be little scrape and so inside it, and nothing was ever picked.
So the
thing is that
I let you talk.
the good lady should join CID.
How is it that the weapons left? What happened to the constable who were there? As from my information, the constable was transferred to Newcastle. Leave from Newcastle, come back as the deputy requested that for Culturama, no officer should leave the their work position. Whoever in charge of here, go beyond the deputy thing and move whatever you want to move. Then the constable came back again from Castle working alongside the task force. So what charge would that officer have? Because everything there was in his position. Are you please come up and let's get that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Gentlemen, I think what we can do here, I just remind the listening public that this special edition of the Let's Talk program, courtesy of the Nevis Island Administration Public Relations Department, Cable TV of Nevis, providing the coverage on Channel 8 as well, web hosting and developers, net.kn on St. Kitts and the Eastern Caribbean's powerhouse. We have on the panel Edric W. Stanley, he's a businessman. Mark Brantley is a practicing lawyer, so is Theodore Hobson. Kenneth Williams is a publisher. In addition to other things, he publishes the St. Kitts Nevis Observer weekly newspaper in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Gentlemen, we've spent a lot of time on that particular issue. We've got a couple of other issues we want to put on the table as well. As I mentioned, the secession for Nevis, I noticed they're calling it independence these days. Maybe a little different name is well on stream now. Any thoughts on that?
Well, just in relation to the name, I've advocated that because it is about independence of a people, the majority of Nevisians know, as we seek to embark on our own and control our own political affairs. The word independence, to my mind, conjures up something positive. The word secession, because it is rooted in the 70s and the anti-Bratcher type of sentiment, the anti-St. Kitts type of sentiment, I think is probably something that ought to be put on the scrap heap of history. As I understand the movement for Nevis's autonomy, or full autonomy for Nevis, it is not about rancor, it is not about getting upset with anyone. I think that we have moved beyond that, and the debate now is properly, to my mind, framed in terms of the maturity of us as Nevisians, the willingness of us to act independently and to take control of our own affairs. And I think that is the inalienable right of any people. And the fact that Nevis has had that right enshrined in our 1983 Constitution is a bonus, because what that means is that the independence movement in Nevis is devoid of the type of violence and bloodshed that we see in places around the world. East Timor springs to mind. And I think that is very important. I was at a conference in Miami just last week, and I had occasion to speak to a partner from a leading law firm in Washington, D.C. And he, surprisingly to me, said that he was following the independence movement in Nevis quite closely. But interestingly, he did not understand that it was a constitutional process that Nevisians were going through. He was quite pleased, surprised initially, and then pleased to hear that we are not here doing anything illegal or unlawful. It is a very orderly process. I told him of the level of debate, discussion, town hall meetings, information, dissemination that was happening, and that it was a very well discussed issue. And at the end of the day, elected by us control those affairs.
Is the debate going to be, is the debate different this time around?
Well, the debate is different this time around, clearly, with Webo. The last time we went to the polls, we had, the background was the 4 bits of legislation that the federal government was trying to ram down the throats of division. Now it's a different approach. The approach is that we are discussing the whole issue with the federal government. I think they understand our wish to go forward. I think they now recognize that it is not going to be a negative approach. That what we hope to do eventually is to work as 2 sister countries close to one another, and we are hoping to have the same sort of arrangement, freedom of movement, trade, and all of those things. And so, so far as the division and the petitions are concerned, we are hoping that they will be exactly the same as they are today. Our people will go down for carnival, they will come up for culturama, or mangoes will go down, to sell during the summer period.
Their pricing will come up.
Their Bryson, their blocks, their cheese.
Mr. Williams
all the other load of other things that they.
What are you picking up, Mr. Williams? Is the debate different? What's happening?
Yeah, I think it is quite different. I mean, you could have quite a civilized discussion with even government ministers in St. Kitts about how things will be or could be after Nevis' independence. There's not the rancor. I mean, there's not the cursing of the St. Kitts politicians. I mean, there would be some mention of Nevis not getting its fair share of aid and all of that, which is a fact which, of course, even the government of St. Kitts will recognize. But we Nevis recognize that the federal government is the government for St. Kitts. St. Kitts people vote for them. So if they get some money from the Taiwanese or somebody else, they're going to build a community center down in St. Paul's to get some votes down there. They're going to probably build one in Newtown to get some votes there. I mean, we recognize that, but what we are saying now that Nevis has come to age, and we want to separate the governments, not the people, the governments, and continue to live as brothers and sisters as we have lived all these years.
Edric, you say what? Mr. Stanley.
Let me state categorically that I'm a Nevisian to my backbone. I lived abroad for 24 years, and I could call a number of names. Michael Pemberton, Junie Liebert is another Junie Liebert, and a number of the Stanleys, Bella Berry from St. Kitts, and these are people who I employed because they're from St. Kitts Nevis. Personally, I see this, no matter how you turn it, it is new wine in the same old bottle, whether you're going to call it independence or secession. It's, again, new wine in the same old bottle. I believe that the leaders of these two entities could come together and prevent the people from making a massive sacrifice of dividing not governments, but the two pieces of God's earth, St. Kitts Nevis. I mentioned in my opening statement that Tim Collins, I hope he'd be the unifying force and bring ourselves to our senses. The issue boils down to money. The money's out there, and all we need to do in Nevis is to put the right things in place in terms of industries, broaden the diversification of the existing businesses, and ultimately the people who are coming out of Sixth Form College and other people who may not have gotten that far in terms of their educational development would have places to choose, options with reference to employment. And those people who are attempting to even come in and cast their vote, which in my view should not happen if those in St. Kitts don't get that opportunity to do it, because we are all Nevisians. And truly,
Stanley, that is,
when you look at it, we must protect the integrity and the unity of St. Kitts Nevis, and the money, and even we are attempting to chart a course for our own destiny. All these things could be worked out, because I'll tell you, even people mention about the Bryson, the beer, and so on coming over. 10 years, 20 years down the line, these things could change. Taxes could be imposed upon them, and hardship and rancor could emerge.
But you will also agree that even if they remain, the taxes can come still?
Well, legislation would have to be put in place with reference to Nevis, because Nevis has the most.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, Mr.
Yes,
Stanley.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Because we do not really send.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
To the kids.
Yes.
And therefore,
I would just like to ask a question or two. My question is, the island of St. Kitts, does it belong to the people of St. Kitts? And
They would
the
say
island
so.
of Nevis belong to the people of Nevis, or the island of St. Kitts belongs to the people of St. Kitts Nevis, and the island of Nevis belongs to the people of St. Kitts.
Clearly, the island of St. Kitts belongs to the people of St. Kitts. The island of Nevis, I hope, belongs to the people of Nevis and the people who choose to live there, whether they are Kittitians or any other people from other countries.
The island of St. Kitts belongs to the people of St. Kitts?
Of course.
And the island of Nevis belongs to the people of Nevis?
Yes.
Well, that's not true.
Because the people of St. Kitts...
The island of St. Kitts belongs to the people
The nation.
of St. Kitts and Nevis?
It belongs to the nation of St. Kitts and Nevis. And the piece of real estate that makes up the nation of St. Kitts and Nevis belongs to all Nevians and Kittitians.
Please understand what I'm asking.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I am asking if the island of St. Kitts belongs to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And if the island of St. Kitts belongs to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, and the island of Nevis belongs to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, then as a matter of fact, if you are asking me, all the people in Nevis, to give up that particular right, what are you actually going to guarantee me when I give that?
Well, Paula, I have made it quite clear. I have no claims to St. Kitts. Not even.
Well, Caller, my suggestion is if you have a claim to St. Kitts, you continue to have your claim to St. Kitts. It's as simple as that. I have a claim to a piece of land in Stony Grove. I don't have a claim to anything anywhere else.
I have claim and a right to St. Kitts. Because as a matter of fact, if I want to go to St. Kitts tomorrow to live, neither Mr. Douglas could tell me I cannot come down there and live, nor any other politician. If I give them that right now, whenever I so decide to proceed or independent, as the way you want to call it, do I have that right when I actually buy it?
But, Cole, I don't know whether you've been following the discussion. Both the federal government and the government in Nevis have agreed that there would be a treaty of friendship which would deal with all of those matters. And I recognize the voice, and you were there.
You don't have to.
You were there when the Attorney General Bart was explaining the whole situation, and he exactly said what I'm saying here. That there could be a treaty of friendship in which you would be able to travel to St. Kitts and live in St. Kitts if you want, and those from St. Kitts can travel over here and live over here. There will be freedom of movement. In fact, it looks as if the way things are going in the OECS, that everybody is going to be able to move back and forth in any event.
No. Listen carefully. The whole idea of actually that the OECS coming together, it is as a result of actually giving people a more free access to each other's countries, but does not actually give them the right to own property and such the like.
Yeah, that's called my information is, that they're doing it so that they can expand the economy, and you must be able to own property if that's going to be the case. Now, I'm just saying, caller, just a minute, man, by way of information.
What I'm understanding in relation to the whole idea of this whole idea of movement and free movement and access as the case might be of these islands is first of all in relation to professionals.
No, but caller, what I'm saying, I understand what you're saying, but I am offering some information for you, if you're interested in it.
I'm really interested.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that my information is that it is not just moving as professionals. Businesses and so on will be able to buy land, individuals as well, operate businesses, free economic space.
Yeah, okay, that is listen carefully, free economic space, but if I'm a pauper and I want to go to Antigua, would they permit me to come up here to live?
But of course.
Huh?
Of course.
Well, I'd like to ask the caller a question.
Yes, yes.
Caller,
yes.
Let's say that you go to St. Kitts tomorrow, and there's a piece of land that you see that you like. How would you acquire it? I'm asking you, how would you acquire it if you like it?
I will speak to, as a matter of fact, the person, the real estate person who is selling the land as it is my.
And then you will buy it.
And then I would buy it if I have the money.
If you go to Antigua and you see a piece of land and you want to buy it, how would you acquire it?
I would have to probably maybe go to the government and ask to get what they call a land.
Well, you see, that's exactly what Mr. Herbert is saying. That's no longer being the case now, where the stock market now, the stock market legislation, which all these OECS countries are putting into place, now abolishing the need for alien and holding license to purchase property. in these islands.
And nobody in it has those things been ratified by the parliament and so on already?
Listen to me. The thing I find peculiar, Webber, is that while we here in St. Kitts Nevis are having this debate, which I think is a meaningless discussion, quite frankly, about whether or not we'd be able to go to St. Kitts, Kittitians will be able to go. I went to Antigua the other day. When I pulled up my passport, the immigration officer said, "You don't need that."
That's right.
I was shocked. The immigration officer in Antigua told me that I don't need a passport. But yet Nevisians are telling you the reason not to become independent is that we might not be able to go to St. Kitts
without a passport.
So it strikes me as odd that an Antiguan can come into St. Kitts without a passport.
Right.
But I can't go
But
to
you
St.
can't go
Kitts
to
without a
St. Kitts.
passport.
Yeah.
It is abject nonsense, and I think that we need as a people. It is to my mind enough to say that we are opposed to independence for Nevis. Whatever your reason, we are Nevisians and we have that right to say that. I have no difficulty with anybody who says that. But don't come with some of the arguments that I'm hearing being advanced, because they're arguments which are profoundly without merit. Here we are arguing about whether or not Nevisians will be able to travel to St. Kitts. And the immigration officer in Antigua is telling me I don't need a passport to come into Antigua.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, I'd like to address what Mr. Brantley is saying there. I do believe that what Mr. Brantley is saying is fatuous, to say the least.
English, I can understand.
In addressing the secession issue and cloaking it in words as independence for Nevis is firstly misleading. Mr. Brantley must...
So what would it be after that? What would it be?
That the secession issue does not speak to anything else but the severing of the constitutional and political ties of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And Mr. Brantley knows that this is a situation that is unassessed. That the economic activity to which our people are now free to partake in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, which belongs to both the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, that the politicians who are proposing this issue have no way of ascertaining what they will be depriving their people of. And we cannot afford to be foolish, and we cannot afford to deprive our people of things that we ourselves are not sure what we're doing. We are taking a step into a dark abyss of uncertainty if we do this.
Well, what are we depriving our people of? We're giving them more chances to interact with the international community.
How can we give our people more chance to interact
with the international community?
When we're telling them that St. Kitts will belong to St. Kitts people and Nevis will belong to Nevis people?
But isn't that
a stupid position?
Isn't that what it is?
I am ashamed. I am ashamed to have people in Nevis addressing these issues, these petulant, childish, frivolous things to our people in St. Kitts and Nevis. You all ought to be ashamed of yourself. Mr. Ted Hobson, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Mark Brantley, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Goodbye.
Yeah, well, let's move on to the next caller, because
I said nothing.
Somebody of substance to...
No. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, sir. Hello?
Good evening, you're on the air.
Yeah, I listened to Mr. Hobson tonight clearly state that the crime rate in Nevis is the lowest in the OACF or the Caribbean. But it seems to me that he is satisfied with the crime rate in Nevis. When you look at a hotel like Mount Pelias, Zetland, Nesbitt, and a 5-star hotel like Four Seasons, Weber, we need to protect what we have. We need to hold on to what we have, because you find Four Seasons employ over 600 workers. And going through that paraphrase, that is the richest and healthiest revenue for the government. So I'm not satisfied with what you have to say about.
Well, I mean, it's a fact, isn't it?
Caller. I was more or less trying to defend the police, that they're doing a serious job. But I entirely agree with you. That it is important that crime be kept at the lowest level. Okay. If our economy is to continue to develop, that will have to be a priority for an independent Nevis. We would have to do all we can to get what we can get to keep the crime level down. And I entirely agree with you. I'm not satisfied myself, but I was just making a statement of fact.
Caller, go ahead.
The point I'm trying to make, I depend highly and mostly on tourism. I've been in industry for like 13 years now. This November gonna make 19 years for me. And you will find most guests normally come up at the desk where I work. Maybe other employees, when I ask them, could they read your local paper? And when they look at all this crime happening in our country, they will say, I'm not coming back. I won't recommend Nevis no other country.
Well, where they come from don't have any crime, I suppose.
Any part of the world have crime, but when you look in a place like Nevis...
Yeah, but caller...
Listen to me.
Yeah.
When you look in a place like Nevis, which is 36 square miles, and all this crime happening so sharply and rapidly, we got to ask ourselves, what next?
Fine. Okay, now, caller, you are quite right. The thing is that I think both Mr. Stanley and Mr. Brantley made a point that as a community we are all responsible. Mr. Brantley especially made a point that, the mothers, the brothers, the sisters know who are committing these crimes. So you and all of us must join together to try to solve the crime. When we have information, we call the police. If we see something happening, we call the police and try to keep crime down. However, caller, I understand what you're saying, because I too have written about crime, about if we don't be careful, we might lose what we have. I seriously believe that. But still, the fact is that we are still one of the lowest crime rate in the world. It's no question about it. But of course, yes, we have to do all that we could to stamp out the crime that we have now.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening.
Yes, you're on the air. Okay, that's... Yes, Mr. Stanley wanted to make a point.
Well, we have to truly understand what is happening. I could only speak from a position of experience, and I lived in a different jurisdiction for quite a number of years, and things were almost like what Nevis is. But it started getting out of hand over a period of time, and ultimately people were gunned down at a particular place, and today everybody states that tourist ships no longer come there. And quite a number of people have left, gone to the United States, and gone to other places, simply because the crime rate has escalated to that level.
But Mr. Stanley, I think you were the one who made the point that the community and all of us who is responsible, do you get the feel that all of us are looking for somebody else to do it?
No, because for me personally, I have already decided what I'm going to do.
Good evening, thank you for holding. Do you care to tell us?
Good evening.
I am not going to retreat.
Good evening, you're on the air.
I will not retreat.
Yes, good evening. I know the crime rate in Nevis is growing right now. It's getting greater and greater. The question is, what is the government going to do about it to get more to control people?
Okay, thank you very much. No, I just want to make something here again. Every time, just a second, every time there is a problem, people seem to call and what is the government doing? Irrespective of what the government, what the problem is. I made a point a couple of weeks ago on the radio that perhaps it's the fault of the politicians who assume more power or more leverage than they really should have. And when everybody keeps running to them for solutions, they keep running away and say it is not them. So I keep hearing everybody say, what is the government? When sometimes the problems are what ordinary citizens should deal with themselves.
Well, I think that on the crime issue, it seems that the conversation keeps being pulled back to that issue. Clearly that is impacting the minds of people quite heavily. But I get back to my central theme that it is the community which has to deal with crime. The police sure are the enforcers, but they must depend on the community. I think what has happened in Nevis, as we have become more successful economically, as we have people now working 2 jobs and driving nice cars and better homes, the children are wearing the best, the Nike sneakers, they have the Nintendo, whatever it is they have at home, and we're taking holidays abroad and things like that. We have become, to my mind, very materialistic in Nevis. And in the pursuit of that, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, because we've been hungry for so long, that now that we have an opportunity to get something, people are naturally, as human beings, gravitating towards that. But I think in the pursuit of that, we are forgetting, if you will, to be our neighbor's keeper. And we are no longer being our brother's keeper. We are no longer looking out for our neighbor. We are no longer paying any attention. So that whether it is the young children cursing bad word and acting in a disorderly way, whether it is, we know, because I am convinced that in an island this size, the type of criminal activity with robberies and things like that, people know who are doing these things. People are well aware of it.
But people do it why, Mr. Brantley? Because they feel comfortable they're going to get away with it?
When the people who do it, what do you mean, the criminals?
Yes, the people who do it,
I think the criminals may well be motivated. A lot of them, you know, if for example, going back to my topic of gambling, if a man has 2 or 3 children, which is not uncommon, and they have to support these children, but they went to the gambling spot on Friday and lose their money, all their money. If they are working, they lose their week's pay. I mean, some of them may well be doing it out of desperation. Others are doing it, I think, because they do not mean to work. There are some fellas in Nevis who I challenge anybody out there. We could look and we see them and we know them in the community. They have never held a job. Grown men who I have never seen go out and work. But they wear the best, they drink the best, they drive the best. And you want to know, well, how it is they're surviving. And what I'm saying is that their girlfriends, their friends, their mothers, a lot of people in the community condone this behavior. Not only condone it, they embrace it. And then, of course, these are the same people who then come now and call into a program like this and complain the crime getting out of control, the crime getting out of control. A lot of these young people in Nevis refuse to work. They lime around, and Nevis is not the Nevis of old. I am convinced, Weber, that if you want to find work in Nevis, you can find work.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
I'm very curious.
Could you speak a little louder?
Yes, I'm very curious. The person who called to say that Mr. Brantley and Mr. Hobson should be ashamed of themselves. I'm curious to know if that's
Can you speak just a little louder?
I'm curious to know if that's not one of the person who said Nevis must go. Nevis must go into depression. Nevis must go. And yet he's saying, well, I might be wrong. Yes, he's saying that Mr. Brantley and Mr. Hobson should be ashamed of themselves. Another thing.
What?
Are we getting to be like the United States, where we see and we have to pretend that we don't see because we're afraid that, you know, somebody would take them or something? Hello?
We're listening to you, you know.
Okay.
You made your point?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
okay,
I
thank
don't
you.
think we have reached the stage where people ought to be afraid to report to the police because they're afraid that somebody will come and hurt them. I don't think we've reached that stage. And
we have, Ted.
Well, let me say this.
We have.
Well, it is a cancer that it may well be at the starting stages now, but we need to catch it before it becomes terminal. I am saying here, Weber, I speak to people who prosecute crime in Nevis. And the prosecution team, usually they come out from Sinkers, will tell you that one of the hardest things to do in Nevis is to get a conviction. No matter what the evidence sometimes is, a Nevisian jury seems less inclined to send a Nevisian criminal to jail.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yeah, good evening. I'm not calling to touch on the topic with crime. A lot of these crime happen because of the parents that part to play with it too. Okay, if you have a kid coming home with do not work and gonna come with the name brand clothes and shoes and chains, and you as a parent don't ask, how did they get them? And all these crime happening all the time, and it's like nobody doing nothing about it. Another thing again, the criminal lawyers, I find, have a big part to play with it. Because if these children committing these crimes and then you go in the court and like defend them, you invest in the society because they're going back on the streets and do the same thing again. And some liars will just go and defend them again. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. No, that's interesting. You know why I said that? All of a sudden I made a point that perhaps everybody's just blaming the government for everything. And then all of a sudden we get quite a few callers who are suggesting it's not really the government, you know, it's all of us.
But we're the government, you know.
Let me just take this. Good evening.
Community is the government.
Good evening. You're on the air.
Yes, good evening. I'd like to make a comment, if I may.
Yes.
With regard to the citizens of Nevis holding the government per se accountable for the crime rate, I think it's basically a sound position because we are mandated to pay taxes, increase taxes whether we like it or not. So if we don't have a choice in that matter, I don't think it's unfair to require that the government put whatever measures in place to ensure that we are held safely as citizens.
But can I ask you a question? And how would you respond to this? A number of callers are suggesting that when these criminals go home, they have parents and so on. You do think the parents are responsible, have any responsibility?
I completely agree with the thinking that it should be a community effort.
Oh, okay.
But to say that we are looking towards the government should be primarily responsible.
Yeah, but
yes, as citizens, we definitely can assist.
Yeah. No.
That we are always looking towards.
Yeah, but here what I want to ask. You said that the citizens can assist. My question is, if you're a parent and your children come home with stuff that you know or you reasonably believe that they stole, right? You're saying that, well, if you're a parent, you can assist, but the government should take care of that?
No, what I'm trying to say, and what I'm saying, not trying, is that definitely the parent owes it, basically in terms of assisting the child as well to get it on a better path. But what I'm saying, to get away from the position that we should not look towards our government to take care of this matter. I
don't know who did, but I certainly did not suggest that.
You're saying that everybody is calling about it should be the government. Yes, it should be the government.
Okay, thank you very much.
I was on this program the other day, and I mentioned that we are a nation of laws. And what the caller was just saying makes a lot of sense. But we have been going around in circles all the time. Again, let me repeat. I was on this program when you made your 15th anniversary. You called me in. And I stated categorically that we are a nation of laws. And those laws must be adhered to, they must be enforced. And if anybody who attempts not to enforce the laws of our nation, they should be held accountable and must be dealt with very severely.
We'll take our final 2 calls and a final comment. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Rebel.
Yes, you got 30 seconds.
Yes, I'm listening to the program, and I want to find out who is holding who here in Nevis right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Final telephone call. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yes, I think some of those parents of these people who perpetrating the crime, they are afraid of the children, so they can't do anything about it. So I think it boils down to the police being more or less responsible for taking care of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, final comment, 30 seconds each. Let's go first. Mr. Hobson, go ahead.
Yes, I was saying that the young lady was absolutely correct. You have to look to your government for security. The question is, the way our constitution is the federal government that is responsible for security. They're the ones who pay the police, they're the ones who send the police, they're the ones who
Mr. Hobson,
they're the ones who deal with everything.
I know you're making your final comment, but are you trying to suggest that if it wasn't the federal government, we wouldn't have the problem?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
But, I agree that the government is responsible for security.
Mr. Brantley, go ahead.
Well, as always, it was a pleasure being here. I think that obviously this matter of crime is something that is apparent to Nevisians. It's something that strikes us as being so out of character with the Nevis that we know and love, that it has generated a lot of discussion. I myself, Webber, I'm looking forward now that the heavyweights have been reactivated, because I was in the gym working out, looking to come back and to throw some punches. I'm glad I see Edric. Edric was in the gym with me. So, I mean, I'm looking forward, Webber, to some more sessions coming up, and I'm hopeful that the people will stay tuned. I thought the discussion this evening was good, and I'm hopeful that we can look forward in the coming weeks and months to many more of these types of discussions.
Mr. Stanley, 30 seconds.
Well, I'm glad for the opportunity again, and I thought that this program would have taken a hiatus, but fortunately it's back and the people are being informed. But let me say this, that the spate of criminal activity that we've had over the past weeks is nothing new, and we cannot really hold the police responsible. The community is responsible. And a few days ago, a fellow came, 2 heavyweights came at my place, Samson and Goliath, and one told the other, I'm not afraid of you, and I'll take you on. And the other tried to intimidate him. But they are, one I can't say to be sure, but I know the other is definitely involved in criminal activity. That is the attitude we as the citizenry must begin to take. We must go forward. I told people the asphalt belongs to the government, the concrete belongs to Edric Stanley. The immediate time you cross that line, you're on my property.
So, in other words, all this happened by your desk?
Right at my desk. And I'm saying to the community, we must begin to take back our community. These people who are terrorizing us, we must no longer be fearful. We must go forward and take them on.
Mr.
You
Williams,
got the information. The information is right in the
Stanley
public.
has taken
and
some
the
of your
guns that were
seconds.
stolen, the public knows exactly where those guns are and knows exactly who got them. And please tell the police.
Anyhow, Weber, again, it's a pleasure that Paul by Joseph and Bongi will get the opportunity to speak to the people of Nevis and St. Kitts. I want to make a suggestion to the police, both in Nevis and St. Kitts, that they install a crime hotline, don't put no call ID on it, and advertise it in the paper and the radio so people could call and give tips.
Kenneth Williams, the publisher of the St. Kitts Nevis Observer newspaper. Edric W. Stanley, businessman. Mark Brantley is a lawyer, and so is Theodore Hobson. We're missing tonight Alistair Yearwood. He'll be back the next time. This special edition of the Let's Talk program, in association with the Nevis Island Administration Press and Public Relations Department, Cable TV of Nevis, web hosting and developers on stkitsnet.kn, the Eastern Caribbean Spa House One Radio. Sponsors were Superfood Supermarket, SL Horsford and Company Limited, and the Bagging House Retail Outlets. Video production engineers, Huey Sargent, Judith Descent, and Malcolm Ramsey. They did a spectacular job. Camera operators, Huey Sargent and Malcolm Ramsey. Technical assistants from Brian Dow and Marcellus Lee, as well as Shoy Daniel, and executive producer, Almond Descent. Join us again next Tuesday evening for another edition of the Let's Talk program. This is your voice in the community, talk that gets results. We thank you, all our callers. We thank you, our listeners. You all have a very wonderful evening.
From religion to politics, from sports to our cultural heritage. If it concerns the community, let's talk about it. It's not just talk. In-depth interviews, discussions, issues, and different opinions. It's both sides of the story and the lighter side of life. Everett Weber Herbert hosts Let's Talk.
Join the show at its prime time hour, Tuesday evenings at 7.
On the Powerhouse Fun.
With all the power from the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, VON Radio, from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.